Where does AI fit into all of this, Ty?
Well, I think as you're hearing here, right, like data is at the heart of everything we're building and really foundational to the strategy. And so when we got together and sat down and talked about what we wanted to do in the AI space, what was really clear is we wanted to be very thoughtful about it and very considered because the stakes are pretty high. We're talking people's, health and potentially lives here. So we wanted to, one, ensure we had some really good guardrails and framework around this, and we're going forward with care. But also we wanted to ensure that AI, because we could see the opportunities at kind of the foundations of what we're building, not some add-on that's an afterthought or some kind of gimmicky feature that ticked the box for AI. So as you'll sort of hopefully see here, a lot of it is baked in very deep into what we're building and that connected care concept that we're putting forward today. We also are very kind of use case driven with it. So we wanted to identify specific use cases and problems we were solving, just to keep us really focused on putting it to use in effective ways that are genuinely going to add value in a meaningful way. So you'll see a lot of how we think about it is quite kind of use case driven. But we absolutely, it's going to be a huge game changer. The potential is massive. We're really excited about it. You should be as well, as long as we're going through it with the right discipline and vigor. And I think this is just a good way to introduce to you how we're looking at AI. So I'll hand to Dave, who's going to walk us through the first two of our three pillars.
Thank you, Ty. So effective AI all starts with data capture. We really want to make it super easy and rich for rich information to be captured by staff and done in a quicker way than today, so that people can direct more of their attention back to care, which is the most important thing. So fittingly, AI is the tool that we want to use to capture richer data for more effective AI. For example, on intake, we intend to use our AI to convert various forms of referral documents, could be from GPs or hospitals. There could be assessments from allied health professionals, all in various formats. And we want to be able to convert that into rich text that can be inserted into interim care plans, for example. And we think this is a really great use case because we know that it's a major time sink and pain point for providers. And then from an ongoing care perspective, we're also going to use voice to text conversational AI to capture progress notes and shift notes across different settings. And we want to be able to do this to make sure the capability is also conversational, because we know that carers have to have a back and forth with the AI to ensure that they're capturing progress notes or shift notes in the right templates. And if they're doing assessments, that they're logging the right types of readings for the right types of observational charts. So we're very excited to be prototyping some of the capability that's going to enable this in the near future. So we want to make it really easy for carers to capture notes in the moment and in a way that allows for richer detail and prevents the scenario where they might be having to log really important information after the fact, where details could potentially be missed or forgotten. And from a data quality perspective, in the middle of our diagram here, pillar 2, we need to make sure that the AI is structuring the data in a consistent and a complete way. So we'll be using it to scan and amend errors and to add in missing detail on capture. And we'll look at existing data as well, just to clean up any existing unstructured or duplicated information so that it's consistent and standardized for it to use further into the funnel. And of course, when we're making these types of suggestions to clean up the data quality on intake or existing, it's really important that we come up with a prompt to make sure from a human perspective that these updates are correct. So just keeping the human in the loop to review and approve any updates that we're making here, all in the name of great data quality, which is essential to the model. So I've talked about data capture and data quality, but again, we'll throw to Lan to talk about the insights and decisions that can be made off the back of it.
Thanks, Dave. And I might just loop back a little bit. If we can stay on the previous slide, please. but I think the framework is really important because it treats AI as three connected opportunities. So making data easier to capture, improving the quality and consistency of the data, and then using it to support better insights and decision. And we're seeing many organizations are thinking about that first pillar and then jumping very quickly to the third. But as we all know, the value that we obtain from data will always depend on the quality of the information underneath it. And so, as Dave's pointed out, by quality, we also mean standardization, whether the information is being recorded consistently enough that it can be compared and understood across people, service, and providers. Standardization is also particularly important for Evaran. It is going to become a Department of Health priority as well, because the opportunity here is to build an aggregate understanding of how different factors influence care outcomes. And so to do that in aggregate across the health system, we will need some degree of data standardization. That's already pretty central to the way MOA is operated. We share standardized information across the providers to help each organization better understand its own performance. Over time, this connected data will give us a much richer understanding of the relationships between individual risk, care practices, experience, and outcomes. But none of that work properly works unless the underlying information is sufficiently comparable. And so data capture, data quality, insights, and decisions are not separate ideas, but each pillar kind of creates the foundation for the next. So just to bring the first pillar to life, and sorry to labor over that, but there's quite a few ways that we're already practically exploring this opportunity. And so the first is we're working with in a research capacity with a very large community care provider. As part of their outreach to their clients, they want to administer very short standardized assessment questionnaires across a very large number of recipients. And obviously to do that, as they currently do, is associated with very large considerable time and costs. And so we're exploring the acceptability of AI agents to undertake that work at scale, obviously at substantially lower cost, and then allow that resulting information to be aggregated in a data set as it normally would. Now, there are obviously some ethical questions in doing that. People need to know that they're speaking to an AI agent. The interaction needs to be appropriate for the population. We need to understand whether people in the community find that an acceptable way. And so that's why we're doing that work as a formal research project rather than simply sort of trying it as a pilot. And so we'll look at the practicality of those models, and the acceptability will be our sort of primary outcomes. Any home care providers on the call will also be aware that, was it last year or the year before, we did the home care quality indicator pilot with government, but one of the feedback for the providers that participated was just how onerous conducting these surveys was to collect the data. And so these were things like net promoter scores, quality of life QCE, like we use in residential. But there's also the question of whether that's fair or reasonable that someone there for the provision of care is using time to undertake these surveys. And so you can see how this could also unlock an opportunity to do those kinds of surveys at scale in the community without using carer time in a fairly robust way. One other, just before I move on, is conversational interviews and knowledge testing. So anyone that would use the MOA product would be aware one section of the audits is what we term interviews. And so this is really testing generally care workers' understanding of policies and procedures, their ability to recognise particular clinical signs, and we'll test their knowledge of these things. That's currently typically done by a manager that will go around and conduct those interviews. We have done some work where we can send out a link to an individual via SMS or via email. They can click that link and they'll get the questions. They conduct it like a normal, natural voice conversation to answer the questions, using our scoring rubric that we write that explains what constitutes a great answer, what constitutes an okay answer, and what doesn't meet the criteria. The AI can then score them. And so that allows you to do knowledge testing across our audits very, very easily without staff cost. But obviously the applications are much, much wider, right? So after education sessions, how much information do people retain? So just a few really, few of the many ways that we're kind of exploring this technology at the moment. I think the data quality piece, we're looking at ways that people can naturally speak, capture information into assessment forms in really structured ways. So things that might have been notes before out of ease, simply recording a note, rather than filling out a detailed structured form. If we can do that conversationally, can we get the robust data and information without putting undue effort onto already busy people? And so we're also exploring those. And then, of course, that gives us a really strong foundation now for our third pillar, which many AI applications that exist or AI purpose, sole purpose, I guess, applications are basically built on large language models. And often we fall into the trap of considering AI just to be large language models, but they'll put it out a whole host of information within your care management system and then surface insights. And that can be important for things like handover. I want to understand what's happened to this resident. So those can be useful applications. But I think when we start to get where we can unlock real value, I think that comes into understanding risk and how risk profiles of individual clients change over time. And this feeds into this concept of high impact, high prevalence risk as well. But can we surface risk signals based on the information we know, but do it in a way that is very structured? And so this involves using, if we flip to the next slide, this is a mock-up of how things might work. And we've been experimenting with both traditional statistical regression models as well as machine learning models like Random Forest and XGBoost to use information that we know about individuals to predict the probability that they have an adverse event in the following quarter, for example. We're using the most structured data we have at the moment, which is quality indicator data, but we're getting very good predictability. And so that allows us to do a couple of things. The first thing is it allows us to say which residents are at higher risk compared to others. Secondly, it allows us to identify which risk factors are actually driving increased or decreased risk within individual people. And so surfacing that information in something like this, in terms of the care record, how does that allow me to respond? How does that allow me to change? And then you can think as people's risk changes significantly, we can set in triggers that say, should that prompt another assessment? Should that prompt a review, of ANAC? And so we can start to use those as triggers to create actions. And so the advantage of using that type of model is that it's very defensible, it's very clear, it's challengeable because you can see how we've arrived at that conclusion, as opposed to a large language model, which is a little bit black box. So they do have their great purpose for really unstructured data, but I'm excited about this type of opportunity where you can clearly see these relationships and how we're driving those forward. So that's it. I'm excited about the early results we're seeing here. I think there's some work to do in terms of agreements and how we can bring this data together to validate all these tools and bring them to you in the product, but I'm certainly excited by what I'm seeing in the early models so far.